welcome to Atlanta Live. I am your host, Lynda Smith. In today's program, we're going to discuss a serious topic that is impacting millions of individuals around the globe. But as a society, we have been uncomfortable talking about it. Childhood abuse and trauma and its lasting impact throughout adulthood. It's not only something that impacts the individual survivor, but also the family, the community, and the workforce. In the USA alone, we spend over $9.3 billion to combat the symptoms, which manifest as anxiety, mental health issues, eating disorders, high school dropout rates, suicide, obesity, incarceration, and human and sex trafficking. There is a common thread that connects these societal issues: childhood sexual abuse. Most people shut down at the mention of the issue because it makes them uncomfortable. And yet, 1 in 5 Americans are survivors. UNICEF estimates over 294 million children under the age of 18 are sexually abused. We must break the cycle by not only discussing it, but elevating awareness more broadly through our respective roles. A movement is underway to bring this issue out of the shadows and confront it. Also, during the show, if you need prayer, call the prayer line 770-300-9828. The Bible tells us that God can turn any evil into good for His glory. So whatever you are facing, God is more than capable to turn it into good for His own glory. Call the prayer line 770-300-9828. The lines are always open. And throughout the program, we will hear wonderful music by David Neira, who is about to perform How He Loves.
He's jealous for me, love like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of His wind and mercy. When all of a sudden I am not aware of this affliction eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. Oh, how He loves us all. How He loves us, how He loves us,
Thank you so much, David. That was amazing. So I am so privileged today to have this panel here to discuss a really serious topic, and that is child sexual abuse and what needs to happen in our society to elevate the awareness and to really start a movement towards breaking the cycle. So welcome. I'm going to start with Chris because each of you are in a very critical role, and we'll talk more about your individual roles in a moment, but you're in a critical role where you interact with the media, and you get to see firsthand the, I'll say, tragedy of some of these issues that we're talking about, but you're the one telling those stories to the media, which is really important. So I want to start with Chris, because Chris is really an expert on how societal change begins and the evolution and all of the stakeholders that are a part of making that change happen. So we're in a critical moment in time. So Chris, talk a little bit about where we are and why the roles of the DA's office or the police department are so critical in our interactions with the media as part of that larger movement.
One thing we know about societal change is that there are certain people that have to participate in order for societal change to take place, and there are certain things that have to happen for societal change to take place. One thing that has to happen for broad societal change to take place is the media has to tell the story. And when we talk about the media, it comes in a lot of different forms. In fact, I think we have a hero today in this television station telling this story. This is a living, breathing example of what we're talking about.
Right.
But you also have response media. So when incidents happen that are horrific, how do we respond to that? What story and narrative gets told? And that's where, in particular, public administrators, and more specifically, different areas of law enforcement who are public administrators, play a critical role. The thing we have to understand as a society is media most often tells the most extreme circumstances around an issue. The day-to-day child abuse that's happening in homes all across this state and our country rarely gets told by the media, but the most graphic or the most gruesome or the most extreme versions of child sexual abuse do get told by the media, and law enforcement is often called upon, most often called upon, to tell that story. So while law enforcement has to walk a delicate line of addressing the specifics of the circumstance, being careful about the confidentiality of investigations, while also sharing the broader narrative to parents and caregivers around their role in reducing the risk of this issue for their child. So I always applaud law enforcement for their role and recognize them as critical players in raising awareness around child sexual abuse specifically.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm going to start with Melissa, because Melissa is with the Roswell Police Department, but she's also a special investigator. So you actually, unfortunately, get to go in and investigate.
I do.
The criminality. So talk a little bit about, first of all, the issue at large, but also when you have to interact with the media, what is that delicate line that you have to walk in telling the horrific story? And, how do you interact and interface with the media? Because to Chris's point, it is a critical role.
Right.
And sometimes it's the loudest voice that the public actually hears.
It really is a necessity, because how else are we going to address the issue, right? I'm fortunate that we have a wonderful public information officer who does most of our public speaking for us. But it is my job to sort of prep that division on the information that is going to go out about the case. And that is sometimes difficult to do, because we can't tell everybody everything, especially if the case is pending adjudication, and there's a whole process. And there is the right to privacy, right? We don't want to re-traumatize any victims.
Right.
And it is a sad fact that most of the cases that catch media attention are at the extreme end of the spectrum, but this is happening every day, every minute of every day, in a household, in a school, in a playground, in a country, any of them. It is across the board. And that's what people really need to kind of wrap their minds around. And that's the difficult part, because as horrible as that one or two stories might be, there's 1,000 other ones.
Exactly.
And yes, so that's part of the work that I really have a passion for. So I work the criminal side of things for crimes against children. I'm also a member of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Internet Crimes Against Children, which is a very specific task force. And we're going to work on some human trafficking issues for that state task force as well. So we're trying to tackle the issues from the law enforcement side.
Well, and we'll talk more about that too, because I really want to hear about how you all work together. Because again, that is critical, that our voices, we do get segmented, and this is my job and this is your job, but when we embrace each other.
This is a team right here. It's a good team. It's a good team.
Get great things done. I love that. So Earnelle, you're in the district attorney's office. You're actually the deputy district attorney for Special Victims Division. So you work a lot with sex trafficking and human trafficking specifically. And I remember when we first spoke back in the summer, and talking to members of your staff, there were a few people who didn't quite connect the dots between child sexual abuse and human and sex trafficking. And so I had to do a little educating on the phone there, and you were very supportive of that. But a lot of people don't realize that the vulnerabilities, really, a lot of those start with being child sexually abused early on in their life, and then they are more vulnerable to being trafficked. So talk a little bit about what your office does and the awareness, and again, how do you how do you work, how does your office work with the media to raise public awareness about trafficking as a whole, while also dealing with the specific cases?
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to be here today. This is very exciting. So I am the Deputy District Attorney over human trafficking and internet child exploitation, and so it is my job and it's our job to prosecute cases of any kind of sex trafficking, labor trafficking, or internet child trafficking or child abuse from the ground up, from investigation all the way to either a verdict at the trial or a guilty plea. The thing that we're starting to do now is have more education and awareness, because we know we can't prosecute our way out of this situation.
Right.
We have to collaborate and we have to come together, as I work a lot with Melissa, come together to eradicate this crime. And what I'm seeing as a prosecutor who's been doing at least human trafficking for the last 5 years, an attorney for over about 20 years, I'm seeing the connection. And I know when we met, we talked about that. And it was so critical for me, because I would say about 80% of the cases that I prosecute, my victims have been sexually abused prior to their exploitation. So we're seeing the connection, because that child sexual abuse, it makes them vulnerable. And human trafficking is all about the exploitation of someone who's vulnerable.
Yes.
So the child sexual abuse sets up that vulnerability, and now we have the exploitation. So we have to begin to go to the root of the problem and talk about the root of the problem, deal with the root of the problem to prevent the vulnerability so that we can deal with the exploitation. Now, make no mistake, we handle all of the cases that when you have exploiters or abusers, we hold them accountable. That's what we do. That's what we're charged to do, and that's what we're gonna do. But I'm very, very, very mindful of having a prosecution that's victim-centered. It's trauma-informed. It allows us to always put our victims first and make sure that they have what they need from beginning to end, and then further beyond
I love that. Yeah, because a lot of people don't realize, unless they're close to the issue, how traumatizing it is for even one of your victims to have to retell that story over, and yours as well, to retell that story every time. That's like
Confront the suspect, the offender, tell their, I mean, think of how embarrassing it is, you know, and then shame and guilt and all these other things that are human components, right? We all have them, and it's got to be the hardest thing in the world, and we're asking them to do it in public, on the record.
And in front of a jury of 12 strangers.
Right. Tell me your deepest, darkest secret. Tell me about the worst thing that's ever happened to you in graphic detail. And then have somebody say, well, I don't believe you, tell me again. It's rough.
It has to be really, really hard. I love the fact that you're focused on the healing aspect for the survivor too, and thinking about them, because your job is to prosecute.
It is.
But that survivor who's in the midst of that, who makes that possible, their life is completely, I mean, it's at the moment, it's destroyed. I mean, they're having to start all over.
It is. So. And I think the thing that has really, I guess it pricked my heart, I heard a victim in one of our awareness symposiums, and she was speaking about her trauma and what happened to her and what happened to her body. And she was really addressing law enforcement, and she said, you all are talking about a case, but this is my life.
Right.
And that just, you know, struck a chord for me. And every time I handle a case, it's an individual case to me. It's about that victim. It's about her life. And of course, we're holding folks accountable for what they've done. But it's important for me that they see what has happened to them, see them through that process, and for them to take the power back that was taken from them. And how important that is.
Giving them their life back.
That's right.
That's what you're really doing. So what is, in your interactions with the media, and I'll address all three of you, like Chris, you chime in too. What do you see in this is generalities, but what do you see that the media, like what is their education level on child sexual abuse as a whole? Like when you go out and talk to them, do you have to do a lot of educating just to tell your stories so that they understand how to present it to the public?
Well,
I think they're aware, but I think the commonality is, well, it happens, but not here. That's always, you know, not my kid. That's somebody else's kid. Or, You know, that's in another town or at another school, or, no, this is a good area. That's not, you know, that's always, it's that distancing and that disassociation from the reality that it probably is happening. And it is just as likely to happen, right?
Non-discriminatory, yes.
Yeah, very much so.
Yes.
And just like Melissa, we have in our office someone that handles the media and what we are allowed to disclose. Again, making sure we protect our victims and protect our investigations that are open and things like that. But when we hold like our yearly or annual symposium, our human trafficking awareness symposium, like we did earlier this year that you were involved in, it's amazing how we get fielded a lot of questions about trauma and about basic things about, you know, sexual assault that I'm thinking that people just know, and they don't know.
They don't know.
And the education there is just, it's amazing. And then also in my cases, individual cases, I'm learning that families, you know, it's happening in families, and families are keeping it quiet. They don't want to talk about it and address it. And so it's like a cultural thing, like, you know, don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. Don't tell anybody. We don't want to open that, you know. But it's been like generational.
Yeah.
And if we're not talking about it, it's hard. You make it a hard place for a victim or a survivor to even disclose what's happened to their body. How are we to help them?
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
they don't disclose.
Absolutely.
And there's no safe space. So how do we create the safe space?
Exactly. Well, I think this is a good segue. We actually have our statistics video, and we'd like to bring that up now because I think it really drives home the magnitude of the issue and just how susceptible our children are to these issues. So if we can bring up the video, that would be great.
There are a lot of things we worry about when it comes to protecting our kids. In 2018, almost 2,000 youth in the U.S. died by suicide. Communities all over the country are dedicating resources to help eliminate the tragic number of lives lost. Each year, about 60,000 kids are hospitalized from the flu. That may seem like a lot, but that number has gone down 30% in the last 10 years, thanks to many different public health efforts. And every year, over 100,000 children are injured in car accidents. Those numbers would be bigger if we didn't have seatbelt laws, airbags, and child safety seats. But what about sexual abuse? Every year, over 1 million children will be sexually abused. That's 1 in 5 children by the time they turn 18. We talk about keeping them safe. It's time to add sexual abuse to the conversation.
That's an amazing video, and it really drives this issue home. Chris, you know, the media does have a massive role, but you heard Melissa earlier, you know, there's still that complacency that this is a situation that we're reporting on, and sort of a denial that this is happening in every home, in every state, in every country around the world. And so what do you see as the media's role, but what do you see as changing to continue to educate? I mean, obviously, our critical stakeholders and law enforcement really help, you know, to add that educational component, but what else can we do?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things going on in our current environment that are both alarming, but also helping to change the narrative a little bit. So let's take, for example, the stats video that we just viewed. And let's narrow it down to a very specific type of youth sexual abuse, which is sexual assault of our teenagers. The CDC just reported in about 3 weeks ago, well, about 4 weeks ago, released a report. And one of the growing areas of child sexual abuse is teen assault of girls. Currently, the CDC reports that high school age girls 18% of them are reporting being forced into sexual violence in the last 12 months alone.
Wow.
So they don't use the word sexual assault, they use the descriptor to describe sexual assault, but you think about that. 18% of our girls in high school across this country right now are reporting having been sexually assaulted in the last 12 months alone.
Wow.
Another thing that's growing that's hitting their desks right now is sextortion or sexual
Yes.
extortion.
Oh, yes.
It's
Yes.
growing,
Yes.
growing so fast.
Yes.
As children are sharing more sexual abuse material,
Yes.
unfortunately, that is being exploited.
Yes.
And the criminals are getting more sophisticated in how they're exploiting that. So that's hitting our high schools right now.
Yes.
So they're not just statistics. And those two issues are happening in every high school across this country.
Absolutely.
Poor, rich, doesn't matter what faith, no faith,
Yeah.
doesn't matter the race, doesn't matter the socioeconomic status, it's happening across the board.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely hear it, and as I go through the communities and I go to different high schools, even in the greater Atlanta area, there's still that perception, though, that not at our high school. And I always have to say,
It's at
yes,
your high
even
school.
at your high school.
Yes.
So we'll be right back with our panel, but right now we're going to hear another amazing performance from David Neira, You Deserve the Glory.
You deserve the glory and the honor. Lord, I lift my hands and worship as we praise your holy name. You deserve the glory and the honor. Lord, I lift my hands and worship as we praise your holy name. For you are great, you do miracles so great. There is no one else like you. There is no one else like you. For you are great, you do miracles like you. There is no one else like
I grew up as a girl in the rural South when being a girl or a woman had severe limitations on what you could do, what you could dream, what you could aspire to be. I discovered that in classrooms and in my own experiences, but especially I was aware of it once I took a job in media.
I'm Pat Mitchell. Welcome to Yes We Can.
It was there, I think, it began to be seriously connected to my work and the opportunity I saw for me to make a difference.
Television time to discuss the changing role of women in today's society.
Producing and hosting Woman to Woman was one of the most mind-expanding opportunities. Each day, we would choose a topic that we knew women somewhere in our audience were struggling with or finding solutions for. And among the topics that we felt compelled to include was the topic of survivors of sexual abuse. When we convened that program that day, I didn't think of it as a personal topic, actually. And I sat there very calmly, asked the questions, led the conversation. This was an extraordinary group of women, but they shared what had happened to them and how they had overcome it. But toward the end of the hour, I think I began to feel something that was now, I recognize, a beginning of the recovery of my own memory. I knew a lot of women working in the media industry who were survivors of childhood sexual abuse. But at that time, I had completely suppressed my own memory of also being a survivor. There was clearly something happening inside that was a recognition that I was not hearing other people's stories, I was hearing my own. But I managed to get through the hour, thanked all of these incredibly brave women who had come forward and shared their stories with us, and I walked to my dressing room, closed the door, and collapsed. Clearly, there was something deep inside that needed to be recognized and reckoned with. So through therapy, I was able to do that. Supriya is doing actually what some of us have tried to do through books, through television programs, through documentaries, and I've done all of those on sexual abuse, but doing it in the way that Supriya is doing it, with data, we know this is happening, and we know this can be done. It was a little harder in the 80s and 90s as survivors wanted to reach out to each other to find ways to do that. And now, of course, digital technology connects us all no matter where we are in the world. So to have an opportunity for a woman, wherever she may be, isolated as she may be, to have the opportunity to go online and hear from other survivors and hear ways towards healing or ways of preventing, that's an extraordinary change in the whole landscape of dealing with this extraordinary issue. To think of a world without sexual abuse, what a wonderful world that would be. I'm honored to have been asked to be the honorary chairperson of this event, and that I can say to my friends how much I appreciate their support, how grateful I am that they responded to the invitation. And I think for me, just stepping forward in this way into this kind of very visible position is again another step not only on my own healing journey, but it is more significantly a step toward sharing a story that I hope will have impact for others.
Oh, the video with Pat Mitchell, I'm so glad that we were able to share that. She was the honorary chair for a large international event just a few months ago in the Atlanta area. And, you know, having come from the celebrity background and her willingness to add her voice to the movement is what's so critical. And that's really what we're talking about today, is societal change requires all of our voices, collective voices, to come together and to really collaborate and be a part, no matter what our role is, no matter how insignificant we may think it is. Every voice matters, and having a big voice like hers is really key, and she is a media icon. So Chris, you know, we've talked a little bit about the fact that the media is a little bit in denial, we'll just say. There's a lot of education to do. How do we utilize these voices, just like a Pat Mitchell voice, or our voices at the DA's office, or our police departments? How do we continue to educate the media, because they have access directly to the public? And if they're only telling it from one vantage point, they're really not telling the full story. They're not telling the story that this is happening in every household. They're just telling about a circumstance, one specific incident.
So I love some of the messages Pat Mitchell shared. And she gave Supriya a lot of credit for doing what she said she had tried to do. I would maybe change that a little bit to say, continue the work that she did. Because she was a pioneer, and I think that's the first takeaway, is for our friends in the media, whether that's a producer of a television news show that may be watching this, or a sibling of a producer, it takes brave people to speak up about an issue that is sensitive. And look, we get it. Media is beholden to clicks in our digital age. That's what drives viewership, that's what drives revenue. But there's still an ethical and moral obligation that the media fulfills in our country and throughout the world to also report on key things that the public needs. And child sexual abuse is one of those. We need more Pat Mitchells. She did it back in the 80s and the 70s. I mean, talk about a pioneer.
That was really a
that was
hard time.
Amazing.
Yes.
And it's so much easier to talk about today than it was compared to then. But even today, it's still rough. So we still need those pioneers. We still need people that are willing to do it. And I love the example of my co-panelists here. Look, they're in the response side of the issue, yet they're still taking time to raise awareness, whether that's participating here. They mentioned symposiums where they raise awareness.
Yep.
That's what it takes.
Yeah.
It takes people who may have a specific role to recognize that they're part of the broader movement.
Right.
And yes, we need to each do our own role well, but we have to participate as a collective, and that includes the media. They have a role too.
So true.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I love the fact, I mean, when your office held the symposium months ago, and you brought a diverse group together to talk about this issue, you know, and everyone who hears that, they have such respect for your office or your office when you go out into the community and you're doing education. You know, you do have a critical role to play in elevating that awareness. So the fact that you're going above and beyond just your, you know, quote, quote, job to do, and you're taking that next step to take on the role of informing the public and trying to raise education. The two of you were talking earlier about some collaboration, and I love collaboration. I love when people connect dots and, you know, become more powerful because they join together as a coalition or share their resources. Talk a little bit about what the two of you are doing currently.
There's a couple projects on the table, but you know, that's really what it takes is you need that open communication, right? I have a certain role in the investigation, and unfortunately, I'm on the tail end of it, right? I'm reactionary most times. I try to go out there and do some education and get people to be proactive, but by the time it comes to me, we're like, okay, what do we do? And that requires communication. Not only how do we make this case prosecutable, but how do we secure a conviction, a plea deal? How do we get some closure and control back for the victim?
Right.
So Earnelle and her team, and quite frankly, the whole district attorney's office, I'm very fortunate. I have a great relationship with them. They do a great job. And we try to partner on as many things. We're talking about some upcoming education projects. I'm an instructor for the state, so I do try to get out there. I do some community awareness.
Yep.
I sort of, you know, volunteer myself for that because it is important.
Yeah.
Because, you know, listen, I love my job, but I have a level of job security that I don't really want. Right?
Right.
So
Right.
there's other things I can do and other ways I can help this issue.
Yeah.
So that would be great. There's a dream right there.
Yep. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And I think that the collaboration is so important. We can't operate in silos.
No.
And it just helps with things moving more smooth. And I think one of the things I do want to highlight that I think as an attorney that's in a trial most of the time or in court most of the time, we take for granted the education that we bring to jury and judges.
Yeah.
The jury is the public.
Yes.
So if I'm out educating the public about human trafficking, child abuse, child sexual abuse, the connection, I'm literally educating the veneer or the people that will come into a courthouse and be propounded questions that may potentially sit on a jury.
Yes.
Then I'm in a courtroom where I get to also educate our judges because they don't know sometimes either.
Right.
Okay, and so it's an honor to do that because what happens is we're now being able to take a case, let's say that Melissa brings it in, we can talk about it, and if they already are aware of the issues because of what we're doing in the community, they sit in those seats more aware and can make a better decision.
Yes. Yes.
And so I don't take for granted that what we do in the community is not impactful to what I do as an attorney. It's very impactful because I know at some point I'm going to have those folks sitting in a box of 12.
Yep.
And if I've already touched them, they already understand the issue. That helps us. That helps us get the word out. That helps us do our job. That helps us get and secure some justice for our victims.
And it's important to have that feedback too because
Absolutely.
I can bring a case to Earnelle and her team, but she can tell me, hey, listen, I have to put this in front of the jury, right? And it is that collaboration and that teamwork of making sure they understand the whole impact, right? Here's my case, and here's all the angles that we looked at, and here's all of it. Like, we lay out the whole narrative so that that jury gets it. And that's important for me to have, because I want to put forth a good case, right? That's what I want.
Of course.
And that's what we need to do.
I love what they're saying here, Lynda, of the power of collaboration and the intersections.
Yeah.
The reality is child sexual abuse in all its forms is bigger than any of us. It's bigger than any single organization.
Yes.
It's bigger than any single agency.
Yes.
And to think any of us can solve it on our own
That's right.
is ignorant.
Yeah.
And we're blind if we think that. And so not only does collaboration produce better results, but frankly, if we want to actually impact the issue, we have no choice.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to collaborate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I agree with you. So I know I've heard you speak about this when you go into homes to do your investigation, the disconnect with parents and caregivers of like sort of a denial of how has this happened, or we don't really believe this has happened, or if it involves technology, all of that.
My favorite technology.
Yeah, so because this is so critical, I mean, we talked, Pat Mitchell mentioned in the video, it's great that we do have this world of sharing resources for healing and awareness and education, but the adverse side of that is that it also is part of the bigger challenge.
Yes.
So we can use it for good, but it's also on the evil side too.
Right.
So what do when you interact with these parents up close, what do you see would be, what is the biggest difference that could be made in educating parents and caregivers to prevent this from happening to their child?
Involvement.
Yes.
Really, it starts at the very, very beginning when we're talking like infants, right? And I know that sounds so simple, right? But it's involvement. It is involvement with your kid every day as they're progressing, and you're teaching them the people that are safe in their family and the parts of their body, all those developmental and educational milestones. It's staying constantly involved. Because what is happening is that we're moving further and further away from that original, powerhouse nuclear unit that the family used to be. We're letting other people do the work for us, whether it's the schools, the cell phones, the programs on TV, YouTube, you name it, right? We're accustomed to that. That's become the standard. And it needs to come from us. We need to be involved, we need to ask questions, and the sooner we start that process, the better off we're gonna be. We need to stay on top of the education. I mean, it's a lot of work, right? I'm a parent myself, it's exhausting. But it's worth it in the end, because you're going to reduce the vulnerabilities and the risk factors. Because even if you have, a ton of money and you're in a great area and you have the perfect family, right? There's vulnerabilities there. And all of the great things about social media, there's just as many bad things, right?
Right.
And maybe there's a resource out there. It's great that people have access to that. So do the offenders. They know what we know. So now they know what we're looking for. So there's that side of the coin that you have to really kind of be careful. As you're educating the public, guess who's in the public? Your bad people too.
Yeah, that's the challenge. That's the challenge. So, Chris, I know this is a passionate area for Supriya, educating parents, caregivers, the general public. There's still these huge voids, as we keep talking about. And I was just in a meeting a couple weeks ago in an affluent area, and they were like, why would you bring up sex trafficking in this understanding? And I'm like, you are the perfect area because you're oblivious, right?
Right.
So I'm like, you're not understanding. There's this huge disconnect. And then they asked me, like, well, what do we do? Who's educating? Who's telling us what to be aware of? How do we protect our teenagers, from being, targeted? All these things. And I'm like, okay, this is where the rubber meets the road. Even the parents who want to tell, they don't really know where to go. So what is your greatest advice to parents and caregivers who are watching today?
So The most important advice I can give a parent and caregiver is to start. So as parents, we have this list that we make of things we do to protect our kids. And I'm not talking a written list.
Yeah.
I'm talking, there's this list in the back of our mind of things we do to keep our kids safe. Largely, I would say, child sexual abuse is not on most parents' lists. It's just not. It's on, it may be on a list that they'll get to someday, but their short list,
Yeah.
it's not on it. So when I say start, it's about putting it on that list.
Yeah.
Your child is at risk. I don't care where you live. I don't care what your circumstances. Your child is at risk.
Right.
And if you'll take just a few small steps, you can significantly reduce
Right.
that risk. So if a parent will start, they'll find plenty of information. The great thing about parents
Go look for it.
is once they put it on their list, we don't have to motivate them. I don't have to motivate a parent
That's right.
to protect their children
that's
if
right.
the issue's on their list.
Yeah.
right.
Getting it on their list.
Getting
is a
it on the
different
list is the critical component. So we'll be right back. But right now, David Neira with Such an Awesome God.
You call the sun to rise, and you lay it down to rest. You hold his heart, oh mine, and you hold my every breath. Such an awesome God, so mighty, so holy, so wonderful. Such an awesome God, so selfless, so generous, so faithful you are. Seated in majesty, reigning in holiness, the table is set for men. For you are the living bread, such an awesome God, so mighty, so holy, so wonderful. Such an awesome God, so selfless, so generous, so faithful you are. Come close to the Lord Almighty, and nothing as sweet as His love and mercy. Nothing come close to the Lord Almighty. Nothing as sweet as His love and mercy. Nothing come close to the Lord Almighty. Nothing as sweet as His love and mercy. Nothing come close to holy, so wonderful, such an awesome God, so selfless, so generous, so faithful you are.
Thank you, David. That was fabulous. This has been a great discussion, and I'm just so grateful for each of you. We only have a few seconds before we're done, but I want to give each of you just one final comment, really quick.
Okay, so I would say, if I were to give any advice to parents and caregivers, please, please monitor social media of your children. The internet has brought exploiters into your home, and through the internet, through social media. Please monitor your social media sites, and please make sure you create a safe space for your children to come and talk to you.
Yes, thank you. That is amazing advice. Thank you so much.